70s plus revenge plus face slapping and refreshing article plus cruel scum. On the day before returning to being an educated youth, she took away all the savings of her parents over the years, including her sister's gold jewelry, beautiful clothes, and her sister's books. Sell everything that can be sold at home, and then happily go to the countryside to become educated youth. Seeing the scumbag from her past life, she dared to flirt with her. She turned around and threw herself into the embrace of the rough man. As for the scumbag and the scumbag, you will definitely be locked to death in this life. Chapter 1. Rebirth. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Shunduoyu opened her eyes and looked at the mottled house and tattered furniture. Isn't she dead? Where is this? Damn girl, if you don't get up yet, you'll have to go to the countryside tomorrow. Who are you crying for? It's so glorious to go to the countryside, and you're not willing to do it anymore. You're just a white-eyed wolf, losing your conscience. Upon hearing this sound, Shunduoyu trembled. Isn't this her mother's voice? Her mother has been dead for many years. Is it difficult for her to be reborn? Shunduoyu jumped out of bed and saw the old-fashioned calendar showing September 30th, 1974. She was staring blankly at the calendar when she saw Shunduoli holding a cloth bag and saying, "What are you looking at? Can you stay away from me? It's really annoying. When you go to the countryside, you'll marry someone from there. It's best not to come back." This is her older sister, who is 19 years old this year. She has never looked down upon her and treats her like a domestic servant. Second sister, is it going to the countryside today? That's great, it's making contributions to the country. Shunduomin looked at her with a smile, holding a book. Shunduoyu's hands trembled slightly. In her previous life, she married a childhood friend in the army. Later, she returned to the city, and the army became a doctor through family connections. This was originally a good thing, but it became her nightmare. She couldn't forget it anymore. She pushed open the door and saw the army and Shunduomin leaving her bed in a mess. When her mother found out, she slapped her in the face and said, "You really don't want to be shameless. Both of them are already very sad. Can you stop adding fuel to the fire?" After Shunduoli found out, she just glanced up and down at her and said, "If I were a man, I wouldn't look up to you. Look at what you're wearing, where can you compare to Duomin?" Shunduoyu looked at her father, but what he said made her feel even colder. Then let them divorce directly. Anyway, there are no children, what a fish. Don't blame Dad either. If you want to blame him, just blame your stomach for not being competitive. The army lowered its head but remained silent, watching as the Shin family packed her luggage and escorted her to retrieve her divorce certificate. She was unwilling at that time. But the family of the army bought the relationship, and she didn't want to get married anymore, so she still got divorced. Not long after getting divorced, Shunduomin fell ill and needed a kidney transplant. At this moment, Shunduoyu thought the family had a conscience and took her back to reunite with them. Little did she know that when she first arrived home, she was immediately tied up in the operating room. It was the army who personally took out her 2 kidneys. Shunduoyu died at the age of 28. The army not only removed her kidney, but also all the organs that could be removed from her body, and then sold them at a high price. After her death, she floated in the air, watching their romantic feelings, their love for each other, and their harmonious melodies. Over the past decade, many things happened. And she was trapped by the side of the army. All she could do every day was to constantly read medical books, memorize medical books, and watch those doctors perform surgeries. Pa! Shunduoyu's mother slapped her and said, "I've called you so many times, can't you hear me? Hurry up and cook, wash the clothes in the yard, and chop the firewood. We're going to have a wedding banquet today, so we won't give you anything." Shunduoyu covered his flushed left face and gave a cold smile, eating a wedding banquet, right? It's so beautiful. The day before she became an educated youth, no one from the Shin family sent her to their grandmother's house for a wedding banquet, and everyone thought she didn't exist. Shen Tuoyu resigned and went to the kitchen. In the 1970s, the conditions at home were not good, and now every household still has the same old stove. Shen Tuoyu looked at a bowl of rice in the kitchen, cooked congee, fried vegetables, and made tomato and egg soup. At this point, she didn't want to cause trouble. She drank porridge without rice in the bowl. In the afternoon, the family set out. Shen's father looked at her and said, after going to the countryside, "Be honest with me. Don't cause trouble. If you cause trouble, no one will save you." After finishing speaking, he picked up the briefcase in the corner and said, "You mother and daughter, hurry up. You're already pretty enough. Let's take the bus today, hurry up." A family of 4 happily walked out. In the previous life, Shen Tuoyu also looked at their backs like this, her eyes turning red. In this life, she didn't have the time to cry. She still had a lot of things to do. She found a hammer and smashed the bedroom lock directly. She was very clear about the things at home. Shen's father and mother liked to hide valuable things under the bed. Shen Tuoyu kneels under the bed and sees a rusty biscuit box. She opened the cookie box and saw a dozen or so food stamps inside. She slowly took them out and counted them, totaling 16. There were various other tickets inside, including 5 meat tickets and 10 cloth tickets. Looking at the patched clothes on her body, she gave a bitter smile and said, "This is my biological mother." All of her clothes were worn by her grandmother, and Shen Duoli's clothes were left for Shen Duomin to wear. Her clothes are all sewn and patched, with over a dozen patches of various sizes on the top, making them look like rags. Why? Shen Tuoyu sneered and continued to count the harvest, including 2 sugar tickets, 3 egg tickets, 2 oil tickets, and 5 seasoning tickets. Shen Tuoyu didn't have the patience to continue the inventory, so he stuffed it directly into a bag, leaving all the money at home. Nowadays, people don't have money stored in banks. Shen Tuoyu started counting money, 2 10-yuan bills, and the largest denomination on the market now is 10 yuan. 2 pieces of 5 yuan, plus the small change, make a total of 45 yuan. There is also a gold necklace and a jade bracelet inside this box. Unfortunately, the other gold jewelry was taken away due to the wedding banquet. Shen Tuoyu put all the fish in a small cloth bag, then walked around the house and flipped through Shen Duoli's belongings. Shen Duoli loves dressing up the most, so she has 2 dresses and 2 floral cotton jackets in her cabinet. Why did she get cheaper with such good things? Shen Tuoyu found a large suitcase, which was also Shen Duoli's. Although it didn't have a handle, it was still quite sturdy. What is Shen Duoli's favorite? Clothes, jewelry, bags, cosmetics. Shen Tuoyu stuffed them all into the suitcase. What does Shen Duomin like? Books, clothes, pens, and a jade pendant, which was given by a man who had a crush on her. It is said that later when someone asked her for it, she refused to return it. This jade pendant is worth over 1 million yuan and is a family heirloom. Take them all away and walk to the door. Seeing the bicycle, Shen Tuoyu emits a strange smile. She put on a straw hat, put on a mask, and walked out. She remembered there was a second-hand market nearby. I approached the largest owner of a second-hand market and said, "Do you accept second-hand goods here? Our house is moving and there are many things we can't take with us. We need to deal with them. Why don't you come with me? We also have a bicycle." The boss was smoking when he quickly nodded and said, "Let's go, let me take a look with you." How old is the bicycle? You also need to know how to share Chapter 2. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Shen Tuoyu generously brought him and a few companions home, and then looked at them and said, "I don't want anything else except these 2 large suitcases. How much do you think these things are worth? If there are food stamps, I will exchange them all for food stamps." The boss was obviously stunned, but still nodded. Shen Tuoyu's registered residence has moved to the countryside, and she is not afraid of this family as a demon. Besides, what if they find her? These things were not done by her, there is no evidence, she is not afraid. After all this fuss, it lasted until midnight when the owner of the second-hand market grinned and said, "I'll give you a total of 80 yuan and 30 grain tickets. This bicycle is worth a little bit of money, like these beds, chairs, and so on. It's really not worth anything." Shen Tuoyu happily took the money and said, "Okay, let's just keep it this way." Watching the owner of the second-hand market ride away on his bicycle, she felt a bit sore in her heart. If it weren't for the difficulty of carrying the bicycle, she would have had to take it to Daliang. Shen Tuoyu looked at the empty home and smiled with satisfaction. If it weren't for the house not being taken away or sold, she would have wanted to sell it. However, important documents, such as registered residence, house property certificate, clothes and shoes that she could not take away, were set on fire for her. She looked at the only chicken at home and smiled. That night, she drank chicken soup and put the remaining bag of salt, sugar, and flour into her suitcase. Full of 2 large boxes of things, she was sweating profusely from exhaustion. Soon, she lay on the ground and fell asleep. Don't ask why she didn't sleep, ask why the bed was sold out. The next day, she woke up when she heard the crowing of chickens. She heated up yesterday's chicken soup and heard a knock on the door outside. "Shen Tuoyu, hurry up, it's just you. We still have to catch the train." "It's a bit faster," someone outside shouted loudly. "This is the person who specifically sends educated youth to the station." Shen Tuoyu opened the door and said with a luggage, "Here, here." The woman was very angry and said, "Why is it so slow? The ox cart is about to leave. This is your registered residence. After you go to the countryside, you should help the villagers in the mountain. Don't lose our team, you know." Shen Tuoyu nodded obediently and got on the ox cart. In her past life, she remembered getting on the ox cart, but was despised by those women for being useless, such as being a beggar or smelly. In her lifetime, she changed into a floral shirt, wore bell-bottoms, and wore small white shoes. She looked up at the women with her nose pointing upwards, and the women whispered, "Are you afraid this is the lady of some wealthy family?" "I don't know, they look really nice in them. The bell-bottoms are so beautiful, I've been wanting to buy them. They're too expensive, but I can't afford them. Look at her wearing a gold bracelet. Damn it. We can't offend her." Shen Tuoyu was too lazy to pay attention to them, so when he arrived at Daliang, he parted ways with them. Who else knows who? She went on a long journey for the first time in her past life and was so scared that she wanted to please them, but they didn't even take her to play and made her carry everyone's burden. Why? Shen Tuoyu sat on the train. In her previous life, she had been standing all the way, but in this life, as soon as she opened the train door, she rushed in and grabbed a seat. After grabbing the seat, she took out her book and pretended to read it. As soon as the green train of the 1970s was driven, the sound of clang clang could be heard, evoking memories of Shen Tuoyu. After going to the countryside, she knew that she had been assigned to the Manta village in Daliang mountain. Daliang is considered the poorest, isn't it? But Manta village is extremely poor. There are 120 households in the village, wishing that 121 households couldn't afford to eat, but the people in the village are still quite good. But at that time, she stayed in Manta village for more than 2 years and married the army. Now thinking about the army at that time, I'm afraid that she can't stand cooking and washing clothes by herself. She needs an old maid urgently, so she has a crush on her fellow village. She always thought that the army was the god of heaven. When he went to Manta village to propose marriage, Shen Tuoyu was ecstatic. They used to be classmates in the same class, from kindergarten, elementary school to junior high school. She thought the army liked her, so after getting married, no matter how cold he was, she would do everything for him without any complaints. Hey! Can you let me? My legs are numb. You've been sitting for so long, shouldn't you replace me? A female voice exclaimed loudly. Shenduiyu opened his eyes and saw that it was Qin Qianshan, who had been assigned to Manta village in her previous life and treated her as an old maid. Why? Whoever gets this position first belongs to him, Shenduiyu said coldly. Qin Qianshan gritted her teeth and said, You're still an intellectual. What's wrong with me? No, let's see how it drips, and stay away from me. Your body smells so bad that you want to eat, right? Shenduiyu couldn't stand her. Returning to a new life, with resentment and revenge, she won't be like the previous life, holding back for a lifetime. Qin Qianshan said, What kind of attitude are you? Are you willing or not? If you don't, I'll spank you. The man across from him said, He's tired, so it's reasonable to change. Little girl, are you too selfish? You can't be too selfish as a person. Shenduiyu smiled slightly and said, Yes, you're right. Being a person should not be too selfish, but you should give up your seat. The man looked like he had eaten feces, and everyone around him was looking at them. He could only stand up and say, Sharp teeth and sharp mouth, who would like a woman like you? Anyway, you don't have to like it. After saying that, Shenduiyu hugged the small suitcase and closed his eyes. Sleep more during the day and not at night because there are many thieves at night. Her valuable things were sewn into her pants, and she was not afraid of being stolen, but she still had to be cautious. In her past life, she remembered that someone had been stolen from this carriage. Shenduiyu leaned against the car and fell asleep. She had to ride for 2 days and 1 night on the way, so she had to maintain her physical strength. After a good sleep, she opened her bag and took out a peeled tea egg. Qin Qianshan licked her lips, looked at the tea egg and said, Hey. Do you have something to eat that should not be shared? We are all. Shenduiyu smiled slightly and said, Sharing. Do other men also have to let you share? Do you have a big face or something? If you're greedy, you'll just be greedy. There's still so much nonsense. After speaking, Shenduiyu opened the cloth bag she was holding on her chest and said, Come on, let me see what it is. You also need to know how to share it. Wow. A lot of things were poured out of that cloth bag, well behaved. This guy really has a lot of things, a lot of food vouchers, 10 yuan, and a lot of food. This woman is really shameless. She has food and even wants to be shared with others. Tut tut tut. Corn cakes, several white flour mantou and 6 boiled eggs are much richer than what she brought with her. Qin Qianshan exclaimed, Wow, and burst into tears. Chapter 3. Welcome to Daliang Mountain. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Shenduiyu touched his nose and said in grievance. I didn't even cry, why are you crying? It's not what you said, do you need to know how to share? I only have these tea egg. I can't share them, but you are different. You won't be reluctant, will you? The ant next to me reached for a mantou and said, Ouch. White flour mantou. I'm hungry, little girl. Thank you very much. As soon as Auntie spoke, the others quickly reached out to grab it. Qin Qianshan grabbed the food ticket and 10 yuan and said, You bastard, do you believe I'll kill you? Shenduiyu looked at her with a smile on his face and said, Intellectuals, how could you be so vulgar? We need to reason. The people in the carriage also discussed and said, If someone else's things need to be shared, then her things cannot be shared. This little girl is not doing things properly, is she? That's right. If I had so many things, I wouldn't want someone else's tea egg. I definitely wanted to eat them for free. This girl is uncivilized. As everyone spoke, Qin Qianshan shed tears and lay on the table, crying loudly. Shenduiyu didn't care about her. She fell asleep with her eyes closed. When she woke up, she took out a tea egg and handed it to the ant beside her. Please help me see where it is. I'll go to the toilet. The ant readily agreed, and after returning, Shenduiyu continued to sleep, and soon it was dark. There was only a dim light in this carriage, and many people were asleep, but Shenduiyu was holding his suitcase and taking a nap. Suddenly, he felt his hands reaching out from the side, and Shenduiyu turned around and coughed. The person quickly tightened their hands. This man was sitting opposite her before, but Shenduiyu didn't want to meddle in anything. These people are all gang criminals, and her small physique cannot withstand it. She didn't want to cause any trouble. In the morning, Shenduiyu drank a glass of milk powder and scooped a spoonful for the nearby ant, saying, "This is from my family. There's still a little left. Auntie, have a drink. My money, my food receipt is missing. Did you steal my food receipt and money?" Chen Qianshan suddenly blushed and glared at Shenduiyu. Shenduiyu sneered and said, "Last night, Aunt and I didn't move. Don't falsely accuse a good person." The ant next to her said, "You lost your own money and food stamps, and you're still relying on us." Chen Qianshan cried and said, "It's you, it must be you." Woo-woo. The man sitting next to Chen Qianshan frowned and said, "She didn't move last night. None of us did. If your money falls, you can find the reason yourself. Don't falsely accuse a good person." Shenduiyu quickly said, "Thank you very much, thank you very much. I'm afraid this woman has a brain problem and is always going crazy. She's really annoying." Chen Qianshan called the flight attendants, but they were not happy to handle this matter and did not want to cause trouble. In the end, this matter came to an end. 2 days and 1 night finally came to an end. She got off the green train with 2 suitcases and saw many people waiting for them at the door. A leading humanitarian said, "Welcome to Daliang. On behalf of the people of Daliang, I welcome you all. Now I am starting to assign tasks, and those who call their names will stand here." Just like the previous life, Shenduiyu stood aside with his luggage and heard. The people assigned to Manta village are Shenduiyu, Chen Qianshan, Du Kong. Shenduiyu went to the village head of Manta village, who smiled and said, "Welcome to Daliang mountain." Shenduiyu felt very friendly when he saw the village head of Manta village. "Thank you for coming to pick us up. I'm very happy to come to Daliang mountain." Chen Qianshan suddenly exclaimed, "It's you. I was actually assigned to the same village as you. It's really unlucky." Shenduiyu also said lightly, "It's really unlucky." Chen Qianshan gritted her teeth in anger and said, "Crazy woman, when I get to the village, I'll tear you apart." Chen Qianshan now wished she could go up and take a bite at Shenduiyu. Shenduiyu's eyes were red. She looked at Chen Qianshan and said, "Even if I don't give you food, you can't do this to me. I only have a few tea egg. How can I give them to you?" Woo-woo. The village chief next to him looked at Chen Qianshan with a strange expression and said, "We are all comrades, don't make any noise." Chen Qianshan blushed with anger and had a thick neck. "You old thing, it's none of your business. Look at the mud all over your body, country bumpkin, who do you care about? Now Chen Qianshan is like a bomb, who will bomb who?" Shenduiyu almost didn't laugh out loud. In her past life, Chen Qianshan knew how to disguise herself, but in this life, Chen Qianshan is like a crazy dog, so boring. Shenduiyu blushed and said loudly, "Chen Qianshan, how could you say that about the village chief? Besides, without farmers, we can eat and drink whatever we want. We educated youth should learn from them when they go to the countryside. They are ordinary and simple, just like the soil under their feet, silently dedicating themselves. This is the essence of farmers, and it is worth learning from for each of us." Many people at the station were listening to their arguments when suddenly the team secretary applauded and said with slightly red eyes, "Well said, little one, your consciousness is not average high. Old goo. This child is really good. You should take good care of him then." The head of Manta village nodded and said, "Don't worry. I know. Shenduiyu, it's really you. Shen Duiyu's whole body shook as he looked up at the man waving at her. The army smiled and waved at her, saying, "What a coincidence. Clever." At this time in her past life, the army didn't pay attention to her. Shen Duiyu's mouth curved slightly and said, "Clever. It's really quite clever." The army smiled and said, "I feel like I haven't seen you for a few months. You've changed a lot, and I can't even recognize you anymore." Previously, Shen Duiyu was covered in hair, dressed in tattered clothes, and had a foul odor. Due to the busy family, she didn't have time to take a shower, so the army looked down on her and wouldn't even take the initiative to talk to her. Shen Duiyu didn't want to talk to him, but Qin Qianqian was stunned when she saw this man. He was too handsome, and his appearance was all in his aesthetic sense. She pushed Shen Duiyu aside and said, "Hello, comrade, which village are you assigned to?" "We are assigned to Manta village." The army smiled and said, "I have been assigned to Wulatin. Duiyu, I will come and play with you when I have time." Shen Duiyu said coldly, "We're not familiar, let's not contact each other in the future." She wanted to rush over and scratch Hua Hua's face, want to directly stab him in the body, think about his 2 kidneys, think about his heart, and make his life more difficult than death. She couldn't help but tremble when she thought of her past life. She coldly glanced at the army and turned back. In this life, she wouldn't let this beast go. She wanted to make it feel like death and fall into an endless abyss. The army looked at Shen Duiyu straight back, feeling a bit puzzled. Is this still the Shen Duiyu he knew? How does he feel that Shen Duiyu has become particularly unfamiliar? But Shen Duiyu, who had dressed up well, exuded a special charm that tickled his heart. Chapter 4. Gu Lian's Broken Sleeve. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When I returned to Manta village, I took a bullock cart, but it was a muddy road with potholes. The bullock cart shook badly. It's better to walk steadily. Shen Duiyu threw his luggage onto the cart and walked with several other educated youth. Qin Qianqian refused and insisted on taking the ox cart, but was thrown up by the jolt. After squatting on the roadside and vomiting, she looked at the village chief and said, "Are you sick? We are here to support the countryside, not to suffer. Did you deliberately harass me?" The village chief's face turned red with anger and he said, "If you don't want to sit, don't sit. Miss Jiao, where did you come from? She's not as delicate as you are." After finishing speaking, he ignored her and got on the ox cart, swinging his whip and left. Shen Duiyu chuckled lightly. The village chief cannot be offended, otherwise some will suffer. Sure enough, when he arrived at the village chief began to arrange accommodation. He looked at Qin Qianqian and said, "You go to Gu Chuanshi's house, Chuanshi will take her away. It makes me upset." Gu Chuanshi stood up and chuckled, "Come with me." Gu Chuanshi's family is the poorest, with 7 brothers, but they also have the most houses. Who would have let Gu Chuanshi build a house? "I'm not going." Qin Qianqian got angry. "I don't want to be in the same room as this stinky man." Gu Chuanshi was not good looking, thin and thin. Upon hearing this woman's words, he said, "You think who wants you to live in? If it weren't for you living in my house and getting more food every month, who would be willing?" After speaking, he left with a meteor-like stride. The village chief was so angry that he couldn't bear to die. How could this girl from the city behave like this? He looked at Shen Duiyu and said, "Girl, you can go to Gu Lian's house. Gu Lian can take the little girl back, but you can't bully her." Like in her previous life, she was assigned to the Gu Lian family, which had 3 brothers and 2 sisters. He was the 3rd and had a very cold temper. He walked out and gave Shen Duiyu a faint glance, but remained silent, carrying his luggage and walking towards his house. In his past life, it was the same, so Shen Duiyu was afraid of him and never dared to say a word more to him. In her past life in Beijing, she drifted by the side of the army and even met him at a cocktail party. At that time, he had a straight suit and was exceptionally handsome. He also said hello to the army, and at that time, the army was overjoyed. When they heard that she was dead and sick, Gu Lian's eyes turned red. She listened to the discussions of those women at the cocktail party. This man is over 40 years old, yet he hasn't married yet. Many people say behind his back that he has a broken sleeve. Now it seems that with a height of 1.85 and a handsome profile, it is indeed fair that even good-looking men are not normal. Bang! Shen Tuiyu's head hit Gu Lian's back, causing her to squat down in pain. Gu Lian looked at her dumbfounded and said, "Do you feel any pain?" "Damn it, he's just talking nonsense. His back is like an iron plate, can it not hurt?" "Yes. I'm sorry." Gu Lian's face showed a hint of panic. Shen Tuiyu waved his hand and said, it's okay. Let's go home." Gu Lian's cheeks blushed slightly. What does it mean to go home? What a strange thing to hear. Why does he have the feeling of leading his wife home? Shen Tuiyu was extremely tired, and she followed Gu Lian back home only to find that everyone in the Gu family was looking at her curiously. Gu Lian led Shen Tuiyu to a room and said, This is your room, the kitchen is shared, and the toilet is at the back." After speaking, he left with a burning eyebrow. Shen Tuiyu looked at his back and murmured, "No wonder he's so indifferent to women. This guy used to like men. Hey! I don't know what kind of person he likes." Thinking of the banquet in her past life, she was shocked. At that time, she felt that Gu Lian's gaze at the army was not right. Gu Lian couldn't have liked him, could he? Tsk. Gu Lian's vision is really not very good. Just as bad as her. Shen Tuiyu locked the door and lay in bed, and soon fell asleep. She is not unfamiliar with this place, so she can naturally lie down and sleep. When she wakes up again, someone knocks on the door. It turned out to be Gu Lian's mother, and Shen Tuiyu sweetly called out, "Aunt Gu." Aunt Gu looked at her and said, "Hurry up and have breakfast. After breakfast, you have to go to work in the brigade." Shen Tuiyu saw that breakfast was just the most ordinary corn paste, which was really not delicious. Gu Lian's little sister looked at the corn paste in her bowl, and her saliva was about to drip. Shen Tuiyu took a few sips and whispered, "Do you want to drink?" After finishing speaking, she poured half of it into her bowl and quickly looked up to finish it. She looked at her sweetly and said, "Thank you, sister." Shen Tuiyu looked at the congee in their bowl. In her last life, she didn't like this family because she drank corn paste, but what they had in their bowl was another kind of congee. So in her previous life, she always thought that this family kept good things for herself. After dinner, Shen Tuiyu went to wash the dishes and found that the family was eating wild vegetable congee. No wonder Gu Erniu was so greedy for corn. People in Manta village are poor. I'm afraid they have saved the corn paste for a long time. After finishing her meal, she heard Du Kong and Xia Yueme calling her outside. Xia Yueme was full of anger and said, "Shen Tuiyu, come out to work. We still have to go to the brigade." Shen Tuiyu quickly changed his shoes, locked the door, and followed them out. Xia Yueme looked at the clothes on her body with a hint of envy, including a red floral shirt, black pants, and Liberation brand shoes. "You're dressed so beautifully." Xia Yueme looked at her with a smile. Shen Tuiyu also looked at Xia Yueme with a smile. She recalled that Xia Yueme was quite sincere and enthusiastic towards people in her past life. The sunshine is bright, but unfortunately she was just a sullen gourd in her past life and didn't like to be friends with Xia Yueme. Shen Tuiyu followed them towards the brigade and saw Qin Qianqian come out. He looked at the three of them and said, "Early in the morning, I met two annoying ghosts. It's really unlucky." Xia Yueme was directly infuriated. "I really thought I was just a plate of vegetables. Yesterday, I made a lot of trouble in my village. Moving from one house to another, I find it difficult to get along with others, causing a lot of trouble in the village. I really thought I had come to the countryside to become a wealthy lady. Chen Qianqian snorted and said, it's none of your business, I'm willing to. After speaking, he ignored them and walked straight to the brigade. When they arrived at the brigade, their task today was to cut rice. As soon as they arrived, someone assigned each of them a sickle and said, cut rice today. Hurry up and finish cutting this land. Each person will receive 5 work points. Chen Qianqian looked at the long rice field and Wei Chu Baba said, there are so many, how can we cut them? Where can we finish cutting them? The worker next to him coldly said, if you don't finish cutting, you won't have any food to eat. Chen Qianqian was so angry that her teeth itched. She just didn't do it. Anyway, if she didn't do it, everyone had to do more. In her previous life, it was like this. They were doing it with great enthusiasm. This woman ran out to play and couldn't finish cutting the rice. Later on, everyone didn't have enough to eat. Shen Tuoyu looked at the girl who scored the job and said, I don't think this is appropriate. Can you help us divide it? I don't want to work with her. Chapter 5. A Poor Little White Flower. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The one who scored the job was not big, only 16 or 7 years old. In fact, it was Chao Sufan, the youngest daughter of the brigade secretary's family. She nodded as she looked at Chen Qianqian, who was arrogant, and said, all right. You all gather together, whoever finishes first will rest first. Everyone nodded, leaving only Chen Qianqian and her friend Zhao Wen dumbfounded. They had never done any farm work. Chen Qianqian exclaimed directly, everyone says we need to unite. They all work together, why do we have to work separately? Shen Tuoyu sneered, that's because we can't be united and harmonious. Chen Qianqian, do you have a collective consciousness? Why didn't I? Chen Qianqian glared at Chao Sufan, who was recording work hours, you deliberately made things difficult for us educated youth. The little girl's eyes turned red with anger and said, whatever you like, I don't care. Anyway, you can't eat until you finish cutting the rice. After finishing speaking, I wiped away my tears and left. These educated youth are really annoying. Chen Qianqian raised her chin, how was it? Just a rural girl, she still doesn't believe it. As long as she uses collective interests and morality to kidnap her, what can she do? Shen Tuoyu smiled instead of getting angry and said, then let's work. Chen Qianqian lowered the bar even higher, see. Do you still have to beg her? I won't work, how can you drip me? Chen Qianqian deliberately disgusted Shen Tuoyu. Shen Tuoyu smiled and said, you won't do it, right? Then I won't do it either. Everyone, don't do it. Xia Yueme nodded and said, okay, everyone, don't do it. Everyone was busy in the field, except for the 4 women on their side who went on strike directly. Xia Yueme said, I've been unlucky for 8 lifetimes. Being with someone like this. Xia Yueme sat under the shade of a tree, her face turning red with anger. What should we do now? Shen Tuoyu smiled and said, Sister Yueme, don't worry, take a sip of water. Anyway, things are like this. Chen Qianqian and Zhao Wen had already run away, and the village chief walked over with a gloomy expression, saying, Shen Tuoyu, what's wrong with this? Shen Tuoyu's eyes turned red, and he felt aggrieved and said, we wanted to work hard, but we were assigned to a group with Chen Qianqian and Zhao Wen. The 2 of them ran out to play. Woo woo woo. We didn't have time to do our work, so we decided not to do it. The head of Manta village said angrily, what's the matter with Chen Qianqian? If you don't want to go to the countryside, don't come. You really treat yourself as a lady. You wait, I'll go and say hello to the team. Shen Tuoyu quickly nodded, she was now just a pitiful little white flower. As soon as he looked up, he saw Gu Lianjing staring at her in a daze. Shen Tuoyu quickly wiped his tears and smiled at him. Gu Lian blushed and lowered his head to continue his work. After a long time, the head of Manta village came with Chao Sufan. Chao Sufan looked at Shenduiyu's clothes and said, "Don't wear these clothes to work tomorrow. You're just being flashy. Who are you trying to seduce? You can finish these 10 pieces of land and eat." After finishing speaking, I grabbed and had to leave. She doesn't like these educated youth, they dress in fancy clothes, they are definitely not good things. Shenduiyu also didn't want to have any connection with Chao Sufan. This girl had ulterior motives, and later she seemed to have married Du Kong. Anyway, if we argue every day or two, she's just a shrew. Whenever Du Kong talks to a woman, she has to slap her twice. Shenduiyu and Xia Yueme started cutting rice, and Shenduiyu was very skilled at cutting rice very quickly. Xia Yueme's speed is also fast enough. She smiled and said, "I thought you were from the city and didn't know how to work." Shenduiyu shook her head. She had harvested rice for several years in her past life. How could it not be possible? It takes half a day for others to cut rice, but they only manage to cut it for an hour and a half. Xia Yueme smiled and said, "Happy cooperation." Shenduiyu smiled and said, "Happy cooperation." I saw Qin Qianqian and Zhao Wen running back and drinking water under the tree, saying, "Are you too sick? Why don't you work? You still have time to drink water here." Shenduiyu and Xia Yueme barked like dogs, but Qin Qianqian rushed forward and was pushed away by Shenduiyu, saying, "Qin Qianqian, do you want to fight?" She is not afraid of Qin Qianqian. Although she is not skilled in martial arts, during her more than 10 years as a ghost, she read all the medical books that could be read in the hospital, and even read books that could not be read. Ghosts don't need to sleep, they have some martial arts skills, and they also studied stock funds. At that time, the army's most popular books were about investment, and he didn't have much talent for studying medicine. He had a talent for investing. As soon as he thought of that dog man, Shenduiyu felt a bit annoyed. How could he make this dog man lose his reputation? How could Shenduomin get involved with him? It's a bit early thinking now, and I only heard someone shouting, "Let's eat." Shenduiyu quickly pulled Xia Yueme towards the cafeteria, which was actually a small thatched cottage. Qin Qianqian and Zhao Wen also brazenly followed them. The lunch was disgusting, and the wild vegetable congee was added with a cake. This cake is only available to educated youth. The people from the Daliang brigade were very jealous when they saw it. The cakes were all white-faced and rare. Shenduiyu gets half a bowl of wild vegetable congee, a white flour cake, and Xia Yueme also gets one. It was Qin Qianqian and Zhao Wen's turn, and the cafeteria lady said, "Without your names, you can't get lunch." Qin Qianqian and Zhao Wen circled in confusion, and Qin Qianqian shouted, "Why don't you give us food? Why can't they eat?" The cafeteria lady sneered, "They work, it's recorded here. If you don't work, you naturally don't have food to eat." Qin Qianqian was so angry that tears slowly flowed down her face. Shenduiyu slowly ate the white flour cake and said, "This cake is really delicious. How fragrant can it be? I can't even bite, I feel disgusted in my heart, but I can't say that with my mouth." The cafeteria lady happily said, "You're quite discerning. Your daughter is really handsome." Shenduiyu is indeed beautiful, and among this group of educated youth, he is considered the most beautiful. In my past life, I looked very ugly because I kept my head down, my hair was messy, I didn't wash it with shampoo, and my clothes were torn like that. This life is different. Shenduoli brought 2 bottles of shampoo and 2 pieces of soap with her. Even in the countryside, she wants to be beautiful and fragrant. Women still need to pay attention to maintenance. After finishing their meal, Shenduiyu touched her stomach and said, "My stomach is so full, I'm eating too much." Standing not far away, Qin Qianqian became furious this time and rushed straight towards her. Shenduiyu flashed in front of her, and the woman rushed straight to the ground and plunged into a small ditch next to her. Shenduiyu was overjoyed, but now her face was full of anxiety and she said, Chan, why are you so upset? Did you jump into a small ditch? Even if I really don't give you food, you can't take it seriously, can't you? Mom. There's actually a lot of cow dung inside. Nauseous. Chapter 6. How is this a lecherous woman? You are listening at Novel Full.audio. This time Chan really collapsed, very collapsed, just holding on to a head full of cow dung and crying loudly. The people in the nearby squadron whispered, why are these people from this city so precious? They don't work and still want to eat free food. I see, it's all young ladies. Just eat a few meals and give them white noodles. If they're used to it, who can eat white noodles? The female educated youth in the other team said, we're not like this. We're earned through labor, who knows what's going on with her? Isn't this Chan? When I was in the city before, I used to pull a bar. Why is it still like this now? Someone recognized Chan, and she ran straight home with a, sound. The head of Manta village was so angry that he stamped his feet. I don't want this female educated youth. I can't manage it well. Whoever wants it will want it. I don't know what the head of Manta village said to the team. When the educated youth returned home in the afternoon, they saw Chan packing her luggage and saying, you mud legs, I don't want to be here. I'm going to Wulaton. Shuntuayu, wait. Her eyes were full of pride. Oh. By the way, I remember the army was also in Wulaton, what a coincidence. After speaking, she put on her backpack, lifted her head, and walked straight with her chin tilted back. Army. Beautiful, someone rushed up to flip it. Xia Yueme cursed beside her and said, you're really shameless. How could there be such a woman in the world? Shuntuayu looked at her back and smiled slightly, saying, Yueme, I'll go back first. Xia Yueme nodded, and Shuntuayu returned to Gu Lian's house. Gu Lian was washing in the yard, and his upper body had peeled off. His muscles seemed to explode, coupled with his height of 1.85. Tut. She is so handsome, much more handsome than those Flow kids above TikTok. She likes to brush TikTok after being a ghost, and she is not out of touch. Gu Lian looked at Shuntuayu's sparkling eyes and twitched his lips, saying, have you seen enough? Shuntuayu coughed and said, ah. Don't be shy, it's not all taken off, it's still normal. This woman still wants him to. Gu Lian glared at her and put on clothes all at once. How could this be a lascivious woman? Shuntuayu touched his nose and felt guilty for a moment. He thought about what kind of man he had never seen before. At that time, dozens of men were brought in from the operating room all day long. The army sleeps every day, and Shuntuayu runs to the operating room every day. At first, she was curious, but over time, she can understand everything. Compared to staying with the army, she still prefers to run to the operating room. So I learned medical skills, and both traditional Chinese medicine and Western medicine were effortless. Shuntuayu walked into the room and took out 10 pounds of flour from his suitcase, which he had carried from the city. She directly took the flour into the kitchen and handed it to Gu Lian's mother, saying, Auntie, take this flour. It's really troublesome for me to live here. Gu Lian's mother hesitated for a moment and said, this is not fair. Your grain was given in advance by the team, and we will give you a month's worth of food. You don't need to be polite. In his past life, Shuntuayu had a prejudice against Gu Lian's mother, thinking that she didn't give her delicious food, so he suggested cooking for herself. Gu Lian's mother also readily gave the corn paste sent by the brigade to Shuntuayu. In this lifetime, Shuntuayu found that Gu Lian was still taking good care of her. And this family has a good temper. Oh. It's actually white face. TSK. Oh my. Our big dog has good luck, he. Gu Lian's sister.in.law rushed in, her eyes lit up. Shuntuayu was directly slapped in the face. Gu Lian's sister.in.law is the biggest troublemaker in the Gu family. In her previous life, she also had a hard time dealing with this woman. This woman's hands and feet are not clean, and she particularly likes to enter her room. The only cotton coat and corn paste of her previous generation were stolen by this woman. At first, Shen Duoyu sometimes didn't lock the door when he went out, but this woman took advantage of it. Gu Lian's mother said, "This thing belongs to someone else. Didn't she bring it over? Why isn't it from our family?" Gu Lian's mother directly handed the flower to Shen Duoyu and said, "You don't need to be so kind. I don't have anything for you at home." Shen Duoyu also knows that Gu Lian's mother is doing it for her good, but Gu Lian's sister.in.law doesn't do it. She cursed and said, "Didn't you say it's beneficial to stay in our house? What's wrong with eating some flour? You don't want it, I want it." After speaking, he had to reach out and grab the flower from Shen Duoyu's arms. Shen Duoyu grabbed her hand with his right hand and twisted it directly, which was quite powerful. Gu Lian's sister.in.law Shi Xiaofeng howled directly, "It hurts. It hurts. Let go." Shen Duoyu looked at her coldly and said, "If you provoke me again, I'll beat you up." Shi Xiaofeng said, "Why are the girls in this city so powerful? Damn the girl movies, I'm so angry." Shen Duoyu snorted and directly brought flour back to the room. In the evening, she didn't go out to eat either. She was too tired and fell asleep. When it was dark, Shen Duoyu heard a knock on the door outside. He got up and said, "Who?" "I." "This is Gu Lian's voice." Shen Duoyu opened the door and saw Gu Lian handing her a white noodle cake, saying, "Eat." After speaking, he left. This guy doesn't talk much, but Shen Duoyu wasn't angry. Gu Lian is like this, and he has never talked to any woman before. However, all the boys in Manta village who were about his age listened to him and called him the boss. In her eyes, it's just a tall and sturdy child. After finishing the white pancakes, she locked the door and walked out. She wanted to boil some hot water to take a shower. Just as she was about to put water in the pot to prepare for boiling, Shi Xiaofeng came over and said, "Get out of here. This is my water and firewood, who allowed you to use them?" Shi Xiaofeng is just a narrow-minded person. Shen Duoyu is so angry that he doesn't even take a shower, so he is quite frustrated here. In some villages, there are educated youth who have special dormitories for them. But Manta village has no money and is poor, so it can only be distributed to each family. Shi Xiaofeng's face was full of pride. Shen Duoyu was too lazy to bother with such people and went straight to her room. She planned to buy a coal stove and a pot, but she didn't want to eat with these people, especially Shi Xiaofeng. Just as he heard a knock on the door, it was Gu Lian again. He held a wooden bucket and said, "My mom asked me to bring it over." Shen Duoyu said thank you before simply scrubbing and changing clothes. However, his whole body was still feeling uncomfortable. In the morning, Shi Xiaofeng said in a strange tone of yin and yang, "What's the point of eating our family's food without making breakfast?" Shen Duoyu said coldly, "This is part of the team, what does it have to do with you?" She turned to look at Gu Lian's mother and said, "Auntie, I think I should start over from scratch. I don't want to be criticized." Just as Gu Lian's mother was about to speak, Shi Xiaofeng directly interjected, "Don't use our stove." "Humph. I want to see what you can do." Shi Xiaofeng looked at her from a condescending position. Anyway, Gu Lian was chopping firewood in the courtyard, otherwise she wouldn't dare to say anything. Shi Xiaofeng is not afraid of anyone, only afraid of Gu Lian. Chapter 7. A Big Bowl of Braised Pork Belly. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the morning, Shen Duoyu went directly to the village chief to take a leave, which can be taken for 2 days per month. The head of Manta village directly approved. "You want to go shopping in the town. You have to walk for 2 hours. Go with the ox cart. But it costs 10 cents. But for only 1 cent, Shenduiyu quickly nodded and expressed his willingness. Sitting on the ox cart and arriving in town for about an hour, there were 5 women from the same village on the cart who looked at Shenduiyu with curious eyes. Shenduiyu smiled at them. They also smiled back. After Shenduiyu sat down, the ox cart drove away, and the woman in the cart talked about family matters. Shenduiyu closed his eyes and refreshed himself. When she arrived at the town, she jumped down and said, "Grandpa, when will you go back? I've bought a lot of things, so we'll take them back together." The old man smiled and said, "When you have lunch, hurry up." Shenduiyu nodded and went directly to the supply and marketing cooperative with a small bag on her back. She was familiar with everything here, but after so many years, she needed to think about it a bit. Entering the supply and marketing cooperative, the products sold here are not as many as those in the city, but fortunately, there are all kinds of daily necessities available. Shenduiyu looked around in the supply and marketing society and saw several new coal stoves. Coal stoves played a significant role, but in winter, when it got colder, one of them became much better. In winter in northeast China, it was terrifyingly cold. A coal stove costs 2.2 yuan and also requires a ticket. Shenduiyu bought it directly and bought 2 more pots, one small iron pot specifically for stir-frying vegetables, and the other large pot for boiling water. These 2 pots cost her over 4 yuan, and the next step is to buy various things, including a spittoon. She has to buy one, and she can't bear the dirty thatched cottage. I have to buy 3 packs of toilet paper, 2 locks, a few animal traps and mouse traps, 2 porcelain pots, a toothbrush, and a kerosene lamp. She also used money and food stamps to buy a bag of rice and a knife of meat. She wanted to be good to herself. The old man driving the car was stunned when he saw her carrying so many things and said, "Girl, you bought so many things." Shenduiyu smiled and said, "Grandpa, I'll give you 2 cents. There are indeed quite a few things. She will stay in Mantu village for many years. Now she has been returning to her hometown since 1974 and 1978, when she was 20 years old. I have to live for 4 years, maybe it's not enough. I have to make myself feel more comfortable no matter what." At the age of 20, if there is a chance, she still wants to go back to school, but it's not good whether she can return to Beijing or not. She has caused a lot of trouble for the Shen family, and I don't know how they have been lately. She really wants to see how they feel when they see their home empty. When the family of 4 returned from the capital, they saw that the door was straight open. Pushing open the door, they found that there was nothing left at home. Shenduiyu's mother shouted loudly, "Shenduiyu, Shenduiyu, you stinky bitch, come out of here." But there was not a sound at home. Shenduoli pushed open the door and the person collapsed to the ground, saying, "My clothes, my cosmetics, my jewelry. Woo woo woo." Shen's father was completely dumbfounded, and he quickly said, "Report to the police. Go to the police station." The police station checked and frowned, saying, "It was sold by your daughter, are you sure? Is there any evidence? Besides, your daughter went to the countryside a few days ago, where did she bring so many things?" After checking for a while, the police station said, "All right, I will find someone to verify this matter, but your neighbors all say that the child is honest and your family may have been robbed." Shen's mother collapsed to the ground, her jewelry, family food vouchers, and money. They suddenly became penniless, and Shen's father borrowed a pen and paper from the next door and wrote a letter to Shenduiyu. Shenduiyu now doesn't know. She sat in a cart and returned to the village, putting all these things in her room. Shi Xiaofeng watched as she kept moving things from the cart, her eyes turning red. Good boy, where did this girl get so much money? She even bought pots and meat. Hiss. She was about to drool. In the afternoon, Shenduiyu went to the forest to pick up a lot of firewood. In the evening, she started washing vegetables and cooking. She lit the stove, began to pour oil, and began to burn braised pork belly. The smell was unbearable. Shi Xiaofeng kept swallowing saliva, her eyes fixed on Shen Tuiyu's shovel. The children of the family were not far away and had to watch. Shen Tuiyu still had enough seasoning. He put soy sauce, sugar and juice, and a large bowl of braised pork belly came out of the pot. Her craftsmanship is impressive. Just as she saw Du Kong and Xia Yuemei, she waved her hand and called out to them, "Come and have dinner together." Shen Tuiyu also called those children over, including Gu Lian's eldest sister Gu Daniu, second sister Gu Erniu, and 3 nephews. Shen Tuiyu gave them half a bowl of white rice and 2 pieces of braised pork belly each. Shen Tuiyu looked at Gu Erniu and said, "Is it delicious?" Gu Erniu tied up 2 braids of sheep horns, while eating rice and nodding. This Gu Erniu is only 8 years old and quite cute. Shi Xiaofeng was so angry that he stomped his feet and said, "Son of a bitch, it's just meat. It's like thinking others are rare, Suddenly, I heard Gu Lian's voice. "What does sister.in.law want to say?" Shi Xiaofeng was so scared that he immediately stuttered and said, "Third brother, have you come back? That can be dinner now." Gu Lian placed his hoe next to him and said coldly, "Come in and eat." Shi Xiaofeng was so scared that she went straight into the room and amused Shen Tuiyu, saying, "Your sister.in.law is quite fun. Why is she so afraid of Gu Lian? Gu Daniu is 15 years old this year. She is quite good-looking and gentle, with a dimple when she smiles. My third brother is the most ferocious in our family." At that time, my sister.in.law and her family looked at us and bullied us. They always came to fetch food, and my mother would only cry, while my father would only smoke dry cigarettes. My third brother took over a dozen village children and stole all the food from her family. He beat up the sister.in.law's younger brother for several days and never dared to come and grab food again. Gu Lian is really tough, otherwise the children in Manta village would listen to him. Du Kong smiled and said, "Thank you very much. If there's a chance, I'll treat you to dinner too." Xia Yuemei also nodded repeatedly. "Tuiyu, your skill is really good, but don't try to make braised pork belly anymore. It's too expensive." Shen Tuiyu's eyes lit up and he said, "How about we hunt by ourselves? I bought 2 animal traps, and we'll go to the mountain to rest. They take a day off every week, and in a few days they can rest. Hunting can be done in the mountains. It's autumn at this time, and there are plenty of mushrooms, wild vegetables, and medicinal herbs on the mountain." She's really craving the medicinal herbs in the mountains now. When she went to the town today, she specifically went to the pharmacy to ask if she could collect the medicinal herbs. Unexpectedly, she did. When she rested, she went up the mountain to collect herbs. How could she earn some pocket money? Chapter 8. Being dragged into a cornfield by the army. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. After being reborn, she no longer thought of living a simple life. There were too many opportunities in front of her in the 1970s and 1980s. She wants to start a business, become wealthy, and watch the Shen family and the army sink step by step. Du Kong frowned and said, "Isn't that too good? The mountains are not for fun. If we really go to the mountains, I'm afraid something will happen. Let's not go." Xia Yuemei hesitated and said, "Yes. If something really happens, it's not good, and we're not familiar with the situation in the mountains. Let's ask about the situation again." Shen Tuiyu nodded and said no more, but made up his mind to go up the mountain and take a look. She still has some understanding of this mountain. She has entered the mountain several times before, and besides, she just wants to try her luck on the outskirts of the mountain. After finishing her meal, she walked around the village. The air in the mountains was too fresh, and the clouds and smoke shrouded at the foot of the mountain. Accustomed to the prosperity of the 21st century, it was even more comfortable here. "Tuiyu, I've been looking for you for a long time, why haven't you started working today?" The voice of the army suddenly sounded, startling Shen Tuiyu and haunting him. It's none of your business, Shenduiyu spat out 4 words clearly from his mouth. The army frowned and looked at Shenduiyu, feeling that she had changed a lot. In the past, she often lowered her head, was bullied, and never defended herself. How come she hasn't seen each other for a few months now, and the changes have been so significant? Tuiyu, I came from Wulaton specifically for the sake of my fellow villagers' face. Even if you were for the sake of my fellow villagers' face, you wouldn't be like this, would you? The army slowly approached her. Shenduiyu quickly took a step back and said, "Don't come over, I'll call someone." The army showed a hint of mockery on their face and hugged her, saying, "Tuiyu, I know you like me. If a woman says no, she wants it. Let's be together." Mad, Shenduiyu didn't expect that the army seemed to have a serious illness. She struggled desperately, but the army dragged her directly into the cornfield. Pap! She slapped her face and the army sneered in the darkness, "Labor and capital are enough to give you face. When you become my woman, I will give labor and capital pride. In the past life, there was no such thing, and I don't know why the army in this life suddenly became like this." Shenduiyu was shouting for help while being dragged into the cornfield by the army. Suddenly, a black figure rushed over and fought with the army. The man was waving his fists in the dark, fiercely attacking the army with each punch. The army couldn't resist at all, and he howled, "Pain, hero, spare your life." "I know. Wrong." But the man still punched him a lot, and Shenduiyu suddenly hugged the man from behind and said, "Don't hit him, kill him, you will pay for it." The man stiffened and turned to look at Shenduiyu, then kicked him hard in the leg and said, "If you dare to come next time, I'll beat you up." The army limped towards Wulaton, clutching their stomachs. Gu Lian looked at Shenduiyu with displeasure and said, "He's going to do that to you. How dare you still let him go?" Shenduiyu suddenly shed tears and hugged Gu Lian, crying loudly. She was really scared to death. She didn't want to go back to the previous life, to be touched by the scum, or to be pinched. When he pinched her, she looked exactly the same. She trembled at the thought of this scene. Gu Lian was too scared to move. He looked at the girl in his arms and felt a pang of discomfort. He seemed unable to see her cry. But it's only 3 days, how could it be? Shenduiyu cried for a long time before realizing that the clothes on Gu Lian's chest were covered in tears and runny nose. She touched her nose and choked, "No. I'm sorry, I'll help you wash them." "No need, go home." Gu Lian turned around and walked towards home, with Shenduiyu following behind him without saying a word. After arriving home, Shenduiyu thanked her and sneaked into her room. The army tonight was really abnormal, it seems she needs to get more self-defense weapons. The next day, Shenduiyu continued to work and as soon as he opened the door, he saw Gu Lian's pitch black eyes. He glanced at her a few times and moved his eyes away. Shenduiyu had just left when she saw many people pointing at her. Last night, it was said that they had entered the corn field with someone, and someone saw it. Several people in the village have seen it, and the educated youth are quite chaotic. Shameless. It's not as good as us rural people. Du Kong looked at Shenduiyu and wanted to speak, but in the end, he turned his head and left. Xia Yume looked at her anxiously and said, "I don't know who in the village passed it on. They said they saw you go to the corn field last night. Are you okay?" Shenduiyu nodded. Who wants to ruin her reputation? Women nowadays care about their own reputation. It's really hard to find a good family with a bad reputation. Shenduiyu's face is now invincible, and even if someone says a few words, she won't die. Besides, there is no evidence. But who exactly spread the rumor? She definitely wants to catch it. I saw several other educated youth walking over, and Chen Qianqian's dog leg Zhao Wen sneered, "It's embarrassing to have left it at my grandmother's house. Just a few days ago, I went to the corn field to hang out with wild men. How shameless. Shen Tuoyu looked at her coldly and was about to say something when he heard Gu Lian's voice. The person who took her to the corn field yesterday was me. She was hungry, and I just broke 2 pieces of corn for her. Gu Lian's words were neither light nor heavy, and everyone heard them clearly. Zhao Wen looked at Gu Lian and said, "You're lying. Last night, I clearly saw you and her." Shen Tuoyu looked coldly at Zhao Wen and said, "So you deliberately spread rumors." "Zhao Wen, we are all educated youth. What do you mean by intentionally saying that to me? Is it difficult? Are you trying to help Chen Qianqian harm me?" Zhao Wen looked at her cold eyes and trembled. For a moment, the head of Manta village sighed. "Well, it's time to start work. The girl just came to our village. Don't talk nonsense and ruin her reputation." Shen Tuoyu arrived at the brigade. During today's division of labor, Shen Tuoyu and Xia Yueme were assigned together, while Zhao Wen and another girl were assigned together. Shen Tuoyu continued to harvest the rice, and only for a few days have the people in the field lowered their heads to harvest the rice. If they don't harvest the rice, there will be no work. Without work points, next year's grain will not be available, so Shen Tuoyu and Xia Yueme are moving quickly. But when it came to calculating their work points, Chao Sufan only gave them 2 work points. Shen Tuoyu felt depressed. When did she offend Chao Sufan? But Chao Sufan looked at her with a disgusted expression and said, "I can't tell that the methods are so poisonous. Beating people like that really makes me feel like a bully in Wulaton, right? It's disgusting to go to the corn field with someone just as I arrived." After finishing speaking, Chen Qianqian left with her work score notebook and a look of schadenfreude on her face, saying, "Shen Tuoyu, let's see how you can establish yourself in Daliang Mountain in the future. Who wants you to make the army like that?" Chapter 9. Don't provoke me, scumbag. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Shen Tuoyu is now 1 head and too big. Why doesn't the army play cards according to the routine? Is it difficult for him to be reborn? I don't think so. It's very likely that in this lifetime, I have changed too much and triggered the butterfly effect. For the next lunch, the woman who cooked only gave them a little congee, which was deliberately targeted. Shen Tuoyu was so angry that he wanted to go to theory, but Xia Yueme stopped him and said, "Don't go. That's the daughter of the brigade secretary. It said she loves her very much, and even if she makes a fuss, it's for nothing." Shen Tuoyu is so angry that he grinds his teeth. After drinking half a bowl of wild vegetable congee, he continues to work. In the afternoon, he still cuts rice. Chao Sufan appears again with his work score book. "You have cut these 2 mu of land today. You are not allowed to go home until you finish cutting it." Shen Tuoyu stared at her intently, not wanting to do it anymore. Even if she did it, there was no job, 2 jobs a day. It's better not to do it. Chao Sufan sneered and said, "Oh. What's wrong? Don't want to do it anymore. If you have the ability, don't do it. I just want to see what you eat and drink. Work points are very important, without them, it means there will be no food next year. A typical man has 10 work points, and there are also 7 or 8 less. Women usually have 7 to 8 job positions, but at least 5. Can Shen Tuoyu only get 2 work points and work 2 work points a day? That's a waste of time." Shen Tuoyu looked at her coldly and said, "The girl of the brigade secretary is really different. Whatever you want, you can do it. If you don't do it, then don't do it." Chao Sufan exclaimed loudly, "You heard me. Shen Tuoyu can say it. If you quit, I don't believe you can endure." Chen Qianqian stood next to Chao Sufan and said, "You watch. In a few days, she came to beg you. This woman is very bad." Shen Tuoyu threw down his sickle and looked at Chao Sufan and Chen Qianqian, saying, "Please. Dream, but big guy, you should also see clearly. I, Shen Tuoyu, was forced to leave by you. I do better than others when it comes to cutting rice, and I do more work than others, which is only 2 work points. After speaking, I watched as Chao Sufan turned around and left. Working in the team means earning some work points. In other words, making a living is not what Shen Duiyu wants. Chao Sufan and Chen Qianshan are now quite proud, but for Shen Duiyu, it is also a good thing to be able to get rid of the hardships of working in the field when he first comes here. Shen Duiyu had just walked out of the farmland when she saw the army waiting for her. How about it? Shen Duiyu, I think we can have a good conversation. If you don't listen to me, you will end up in this situation. If you don't have a job, you're here, but it's hard to move a step, so think carefully. All of this was caused by the army. As soon as they arrived at Wulaton, Chao Sufan immediately fell in love with him. The army is still decent, with a height of 1.78 and fair skin, wearing glasses and looking like a cultured scumbag. Ah bah. It's not a literary scumbag, it's better than a beast. Shen Duiyu gave him a slight smile, and the army couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. He just said. Which woman doesn't like him like this? Especially the more he uses means to deal with women, the more they feel that he is putting his heart into it. Shen Duiyu glanced at him with a smile and then fiercely hit him with his knee joint. The army covered the area in pain and shouted, ah 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 ah. Shen Duiyu laughed so hard that he couldn't stand up and said, Army, don't provoke me, scumbag. As soon as I looked up, I saw Lian looking at her with an inscrutable expression. Ma Dan, why does this man always appear at this time? Shen Duiyu smiled at him and said, I'll talk to him about our hometown friendship. Why did you come? Lian twitched his lips and said, I just heard that you're not planning to work in the team anymore. Come and ask. As Shen Duiyu walked, he sighed and said, yes. I don't plan to work in the team anymore. I work 2 hours a day and can't even eat enough. I can talk to the brigade secretary. Shen Duiyu waved his hand and said, forget it. The brigade secretary won't be too concerned about such things. I have other plans, and it's not just about working underground. It's definitely not possible to do business now, but here are mountains everywhere, where you can make money by picking medicinal herbs, mushrooms, and game. Lian looked at her and said, do you want to enter the mountain? How dangerous is it for you to be a girl's house? Shen Duiyu sighed and said, do I have any choice here? If it weren't for her remaining 40 or so grain vouchers, she would have to beg Chao Sufan today in frustration. Why beg her? After Shen Duiyu arrived home, he followed the ox cart to the town. She bought a lot of things this time, including a chopping stick knife, a small hoe, a backpack, and a medicine jar. She spent a total of 20 yuan. Shen Duiyu sighed and realized that she had spent half of her money. We have to earn money. The next morning, I saw Xia Yueme standing outside and saying, Duiyu, are you still going to the brigade today? Shen Duiyu shook his head and said, if I really go to the brigade today, I reckon those people will laugh to death. Besides, they won't give me any pay. Xia Yueme gritted her teeth and said, Duiyu, why don't you go beg them? Otherwise, there will be no way to survive. Requesting someone. Is it useful to ask for help? In her previous life, she begged her mother to save her, but her mother just smiled and lied to her, giving up the army to her sister. She begged the army to let her go, but the knife slowly cut into her body. She begged Shen Duomin, but Shen Duomin kicked her hard and said that although the army and she were childhood sweethearts, they were snatched by her. She felt so uncomfortable, and even if she felt uncomfortable, it wouldn't make her feel better. Seeking others is the most useless thing, it's better to seek oneself than to seek others. Shen Duiyu smiled at her and said, I'm going up the mountain, Yueme, you're fine. After speaking, he walked up the mountain carrying a basket on his back. The wind in Daliang mountain is incredibly cool, and on the mountain road, you can see various wild vegetables such as chrysanthemum, goji berry sprouts, prickly tender sprouts. Shen Duiyu became more and more excited as he dug, and couldn't help but hum a song. In the 21st century, it's not easy to eat these things. Are you planning to live off wild vegetables? Gu Lianjun was about to be infuriated by this woman. Shen Tuiyu trembled with fear. She looked up and saw Gu Lian's dark eyes. She paused for a moment and said, "You. Why are you here? Shouldn't you be working in the team?" Gu Lian was restless, and he didn't know why he followed Shen Tuiyu up the mountain by a stroke of luck. "Don't worry, come with me," Gu Lian said directly. "I will go find the brigade secretary." Shen Tuiyu looked at him and sighed, "I feel more at ease this way. It's not necessary to work in the field." "Gu Lian, you crazy person, let me down." Gu Lian directly put her on his shoulder, and Shen Tuiyu's waist was extremely thin and soft. Gu Lian's face turned red. "Does this woman not eat?" Shen Tuiyu bit Gu Lian's shoulder fiercely and said, "You let me down, Gu Lian. I won't go to the brigade. If you dare to send me to the brigade, I will hate you to death." Chapter 10. Digging Wild Vegetables and Herbs. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Gu Lian let go of Shen Tuiyu. He felt like he was crazy. How could he have done such a crazy thing today? Shen Tuiyu sighed and said, "Gu Lian, thank you for saving me a few days ago. However, I don't like others to criticize me in my life. I have my own way of life, please respect me." Gu Lian looked at Shen Tuiyu with a face full of grievances, and then he turned around and left. Shen Tuiyu felt a bit uneasy in her heart, but in this life, she doesn't want to touch men. She does have food stamps and some money, but it still makes her feel insecure. She wants to rent an independent house and live a simple life. It's not convenient to live with the Gu family. She took a breath and continued to dig some wild vegetables, which were also delicious when dried. After digging wild vegetables for a while, she suddenly felt a bit like Wang Baochuan. "Bah! Isn't that Wang Baochuan? Bah, bah, bah. I am much more pitiful than Wang Baochuan. At least she has become the queen, but I am also good, reborn, ha ha ha." Shen Tuiyu was in a good mood and dug up some wild vegetables before starting to walk up the mountain. She wants to find several herbs, such as aconite, mandala flowers. In the Shenong Benchao Jing, there is another surprising record about aconitum, which is, its juice is fried, named Shi Wang, killing birds and animals. In ancient times, many hunters used aconitum to fry and extract juice, then coated it on arrows for hunting and killing wild animals. This refining method happened to be familiar to Shen Tuiyu. She walked around the forest and couldn't help but squat on the ground and pick up the herbs when she saw them. There are medicinal herbs everywhere, and this statement is not deceiving at all. It's all over the mountains, and before we even reach the mountains, we can see several common medicinal herbs. Countryside people don't know how to pick herbs. They feel that with the skill of picking herbs, it's better to work in the fields. Tsang'er zi, long kue, purslane, Plantago asiatica, Jaer gen, nettle. As soon as she walked into the mountains, she found a patch of Polygonum multiflorum, which made Shen Tuiyu extremely happy. She carefully pulled the medicine hoe in her hand and actually dug out more than 10 Polygonum multiflorum for her. The feeling of digging medicinal herbs is really amazing, it's amazing, and Shen Tuiyu's mood has improved a bit. At noon, she ate the corn cakes she brought with her and spent the whole day digging up various medicinal herbs on the mountain. As it was getting dark, she slowly descended the mountain, but as soon as she got home, she heard cries coming from inside. "It hurts. It hurts so much, is she trying to kill me?" Shen Tuiyu saw the window at home open and sneered, knowing that Shi Xiaofeng would enter her room, so she placed animal traps and mouse traps in inconspicuous places. Sure enough, as soon as he entered the room, he saw blood stains on the animal trap, and Shi Xiaofeng suffered a lot. Shen Tuiyu sighed and saw that the food in the room was gone. Fortunately, she knew that Shi Xiaofeng had such a meal, so she only bought 2 days of food. I don't know which one lacks virtue. If you steal my grain, you won't be afraid of getting poisoned. My grain is mixed with rat poison, so if you're not afraid of death, take more. Don't blame me if you die, Shunduiyu shouted loudly. Next door, Gu Lian's mother came out and looked at Shunduiyu, saying, "What's wrong with this?" Shunduiyu pointed to the room and said, "My room has been robbed. Someone has stolen my food." Gu Lian's mother's face changed and she rushed straight into Shi Xiaofeng's room. Shi Xiaofeng's feet were covered in blood, crying pitifully. Gu Lian's mother pretended not to be able to see it, flipped around, and finally found the small half-bag of grain under Shi Xiaofeng's bed. "You shameless fool, which one in our family is like you?" Gu Lian's mother usually has a good temper, but that doesn't mean she doesn't distinguish right from wrong. She picked up the sole of her shoe and pulled it towards Shi Xiaofeng's face. Shi Xiaofeng was stunned by the pull and her face was swollen. Shunduiyu feels so satisfied in his heart. This is also something that Gu Lian's mother can't hold back anymore. Shi Xiaofeng's hands and feet are not clean, and she is also aware of it. There are some delicious things at home on weekdays, but they disappear when she turns around. She doesn't even bother with her. It's good now, everyone dares to steal someone else's things. Gu Lian's mother said coldly, "Next time I steal something, I'll take it to the police station for you." Shunduiyu watched a great show, and when Gu Lian's mother came out, Shunduiyu said, "Auntie, actually I want to find another place to live. I like quietness. Do you know anyone who has a free yard? I'm willing to pay." Gu Lian's mother was a bit anxious and said, "Girl, I've already beaten her. Don't be angry." "I know, Auntie, I understand everything. I won't say anything about today's situation, I just like tranquility and want to live alone." Shunduiyu quickly explained that there are many people and different eyes. She wants to make medicinal herbs, so naturally she wants to live alone well. Gu Lian's mother thought for a moment and said, "I do have an old courtyard at home. I plan to live in it for Gu Lian's marriage in the future, but it's a bit broken. Let me take you to take a look. It doesn't matter if you break it. It can be neat." Shunduiyu is quite happy. She didn't expect that Gu Lian's family still has a house, and she didn't even know about it in her past life. Gu Lian's mother took her to the back and walked until the end before she said helplessly, "It's just that this place is too remote. You little girl, isn't it safe to live here? This is at the back of the village, alone, with a big river next to it, and the environment is also very good." As soon as I pushed open the door, it was the kind of thatched cottage that was dilapidated. There was a room with a roof, and the room next to it didn't even have a roof. Gu Lian's mother felt embarrassed and said, "We plan to wait for Gu Lian to get married and then take care of it. I asked my family Gu Lian to tidy up this." She looked carefully at Shunduiyu's face, and Shunduiyu happily took Gu Lian's mother's hand and said, "Auntie, I really like this place." She really likes it, quiet, and not disturbed by anyone. Gu Lian's mother saw that she really liked her and breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. The boss is a lazy person. This person, I can't say. At that time, the boss liked her, and I beat and scolded her, but I still married her. Gu Lian's mother didn't like Shi Xiaofeng either. Shunduiyu listened quietly to her rambling and said, "Every family has a hard-to-read scripture." Gu Lian's mother sighed and said, "Gu Lian's father and I have also planned to move out and live alone when our third child becomes married, so we don't have to worry too much." Gu Lian's mother had considered it for quite a long time. Shunduiyu smiled and said, "Maybe in the future, finding a third wife would be a good idea." Pooh. My Gu Lian's character is like a piece of ice. Which girl is so good that she can take a liking to him? Speaking of him, I am even more worried. You don't even know that many girls in the village like him, but he can scold and cry those girls with just one glare. Do you think there is such a thing? Gu Lian's mother became even angrier. Shunduiyu nodded wildly in his heart. "Auntie, you have the truth. Your son is in his 40s and hasn't even found a daughter. Law, I'm afraid he's having a problem in his heart. Can you say that? It definitely cannot be said.